In a market economy, the allocation of resources is decentralized. That means there is no central planner. It all depends on the interaction of many self-interested buyers and sellers. So, each buyer is trying to maximize his or her own satisfaction. So, buyer is deciding how much quantity to buy based on his or her own satisfaction. Economists, they call it utility. Similarly, sellers are also selling up to that much quantity that maximizes his or her own revenue. So, these buyers and sellers, they are self interested and self utility maximizers. They are not at all thinking about others. Then the question is, if that is the case, when everybody is so self interested, is the market allocation of resources desirable, or would a different allocation of resources make the society better off, right? So, to answer this, what we have to do, we use total surplus as a measure of society's well-being or welfare, as we discussed as I have just said, and we have to prove that whether that market allocation is efficient or not, right? So, efficiency, how we are defining? Total surplus equals to buyers, value to the buyers minus cost to the sellers. And once again, you remember that an allocation of resources is efficient if it maximizes total surplus. Okay? Total surplus. So, an allocation which results in maximum social welfare, that is called an efficient resource allocation. And if you recall, this thing also we say that efficiency basically means goods are consumed by those buyers who value them maximum, and goods are produced by those producers who are cost efficient. Okay? Right? So, lowering the quantity of good would not increase total surplus, either increasing than the equilibrium, than that particular allocation, or lowering the quantity of good compared to that allocation will not result in higher total surplus. If it is higher, then the existing allocation is not efficient. That is what we have to remember. An allocation of resources is efficient only when it maximizes value to the buyers, it minimizes cost to the sellers. If you find out another allocation by either raising the quantity demanded or supplied or lowering it, which maximizes total surplus, then the existing allocation is not efficient. Now, we will evaluate the market equilibrium. Look at this, at price 30, the quantity demand is total quantity demand, I am talking about aggregate quantity demanded in the market, which is 15. Now, the question is whether this particular allocation is efficient or social welfare maximizing or not. So, what is happening at 30? This is the consumer surplus and this is the producer surplus. Okay? Using these two concepts which we learned earlier, consumer surplus is the area above the price line below the demand curve. Producer surplus is the area below the price line above the supply curve. So, this is the total surplus. So, is this total surplus maximum, or is there any other price quantity combination that produces even more total surplus than this? That is what we are trying to prove. Okay? Look at what is happening. So, at this price 30, who are the buyers? At price 30, only those buyers would be able to buy the product whose willingness to pay is at least greater or equal to $30. Only they will be able to buy, because 30 is the market price. If your willingness to pay is lower than 30, you have to leave the market. So, that means at this price, at the market clearing or equilibrium price, every buyer who are buying, their willingness to pay is greater than or equals to $30. If you think about the suppliers, at this price only those suppliers will supply in the market whose cost of production is either lower or equals to 30. In strict sense, we will say that whose willingness to receive is equal to or less than 30. So, this is what is happening here. Every buyer whose willingness to pay is less than 30, they will leave the market. So, the buyers who value the good most highly are the ones who consume it at this price. Okay? Only those buyers who are valuing the product maximum, they are existing. Others whose value determined by their willingness to pay is lower than 30, they have left the market. Now, think about the suppliers. So, every seller whose cost of production is lower than or equal to 30 will produce the good. Those producers whose cost of production is more than 30, they have also left the market. So, that means goods are produced by only those producers who are having minimum cost of production. So, every seller whose cost is higher than 30 will not be able to supply. So, the sellers with lowest cost will produce the good. So, that means what we have learned, at market equilibrium, consumers who are valuing the product they are buying, and the producers whose cost of production is minimum, they are only supplying. So, that means goods are produced by those who value the maximum, goods are consumed by those who value the maximum, goods are produced by those who are cost efficient, that is satisfied in this market equilibrium, and then we can say that then market equilibrium is efficient. If you take any other price quantity, let us say you are supplying 20 units and price would be more than 30. So, at 20, value to the buyers is much lower than cost of production. Obviously, when value to the buyer is lower than cost of production, what will happen? Value to the consumer to the marginal unit is only 20 and cost is much higher because supply curve gives cost. So, obviously, you can increase the total surplus by reducing your quantity supplied from 20 to some lower amount. This is true at any Q greater than 15. At any Q, if you go to the right hand side, cost of production is much higher than value to the consumers. So, obviously, if you recall that rational people think at the margin, and economists, they will always decide about the optimum by equating marginal benefit with marginal cost. So, at 20, the marginal benefit is only this much, determined by the demand curve. Marginal supply is this much, determined by the supply curve. Since marginal cost is much higher than marginal benefit at this unit, to arrive at optimality, we must reduce the quantity from 20 and then ultimately MB equals to MC is achieved at 15. Same thing will happen if you take any price which is lower than 15. What will happen? Take any price, let us say 10, your marginal cost is much lower than the marginal benefit. So, therefore, you can increase the consumers, you can increase surplus, total surplus by raising the quantity demanded and supplied from 10 to 15. Okay. Therefore, indirectly that means we have proved neither a price which is greater than 15 towards the right side nor a price which is lower than 15 is actually optimum or efficient. Okay? So, that means to achieve optimality, there is only one condition, that marginal benefit and marginal cost of supply should be equal, and that is happening only in this equilibrium when demand curve and supply curve they are intersecting. So, that means this 15 and 30, this combination is market equilibrium and social welfare maximizer. So, that means social welfare is maximized only at the equilibrium price and quantity. Any price or quantity higher or lower than the equilibrium will result in lower surplus, lower total surplus or lower level of social welfare. All right. So, the market equilibrium then maximizes total surplus at any other quantity can increase total surplus by moving towards market equilibrium. That is what we have proved. When you are in the right side, your marginal cost was higher than the marginal benefit. That is how we were able to increase total surplus by reducing the quantity from 20 to 15. At any quantity lower than 15, we were getting marginal benefit higher than the marginal supply, and therefore, by increasing the quantity demanded or supplied from 10 to 15, we are able to reach the surplus. So, no other price quantity combination apart from equilibrium is efficient. That is how we are proving that equilibrium price and quantity or competitive equilibrium social welfare maximizing, because at this point resource allocation is efficient. Why this is so? Because at this point goods are produced by only those producers who are cost efficient. Goods are consumed by those who value them maximum. Okay? Other buyers left the market because their willingness to pay might be lower than the equilibrium price. Other suppliers also have left the market because their cost of production might be much higher than the price what is prevailing in the market. That is how at equilibrium value to the consumers is maximum and cost to the producer is minimum. That is how we prove that market equilibrium is social welfare maximizing. All right. That is how we proved it. Now, let us see what is our, as I said, Adam Smith was the forefather of economics. He introduced the concept of invisible hand. If you recall this concept, we have learned earlier. What is invisible hand? In a market, if the price is either higher or lower than the equilibrium, then the invisible hand we will create a pressure on the price either to move downward or to move upward to ensure the equilibrium. That invisible hand is basically the market forces that we have learned earlier. Okay. So, any price apart from equilibrium is not a stable price, rather market forces will always create a pressure to the price either upward if the existing price is lower than the equilibrium, or downward if the existing price is higher than the equilibrium. Okay. Now, let us see what Adam Smith said. Man has almost constant occasion for the help of his brethren, and it is vain for him to expect it from their benevolence only. He will be more likely to prevail if he can interest their self-love in his favor and show them that it is for their own advantage to do for him what he requires of them. It is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interest. This is very important thing what Adam Smith said, that everybody basically, what is the meaning in simple term, everyone in the market, they are looking for all the buyers, all the sellers, when they are interacting in a marketplace, they are showing only their own self interest. They are self interest maximizers. So, when we have our dinner, what we are expecting, not the benevolence from the butcher, brewer or the baker, rather we get these products from them just because of their self interest. Okay. So, when we buy a product, it is not the suppliers are showing love to us. We are not getting the product, we are not getting neither lunch, nor dinner, nor breakfast because of the supplier's benevolence. Rather, the suppliers like meat, like potato, like idli, like dosa, whatever we are having in our plate, it is coming not from their benevolence, rather from their self interest. Okay? From their self interest, that is what we are getting. At the same time, suppliers are able to supply the product not because of the benevolence of the buyer, rather the buyers are buying it, it is because of their self interest. Buyers are not buying to help the supplier, rather they are buying it to maximize their own satisfaction. Neither the buyer nor the seller is showing any kind of benevolence when they interact in the market, rather they are always driven by their self interest. That is what Adam Smith said. But interestingly, even though both the buyers and sellers are self utility maximizers and driven only, always driven only by their self interest, what is happening? It is actually leading to a situation which is social welfare maximizing. Okay? So, every individual neither intends to promote the public interest nor knows how much he is promoting it. Interesting result actually. We prove that market equilibrium is social welfare maximizing, and market equilibrium means n number of buyers and n number of sellers, they have interacted, and at the end they have arrived at that equilibrium condition. But in the process, no single individual, no buyer or no single individual seller, they were trying to promote social welfare. Neither they were aware they are actually doing it. If at all they do, by how much, that also they do not know. That is very interesting. So, their interaction in the marketplace is completely driven by their self interest. But ultimately, we are getting a situation, the equilibrium condition, which is social welfare maximizing. So, in the process, buyers and sellers, they were not aware they are actually behaving or interacting to maximize social welfare. Neither they are aware of their contribution to the social welfare. Okay? So, that is the beauty of this market situation. Even though individually they are always self interest or self utility maximizers, at the aggregate their behavior is leading to maximum social welfare. That is the beauty of market situation. So, he intends, he means buyer or seller, only his own gain, and he is in this, as many other cases, led by an invisible hand that we are talking about, that promote an end which was no part of his intention. What is the meaning of this sentence? So, buyers and sellers, they are promoting an end. What is the end result? End result is maximum social welfare. which was not part of their intention actually. What was their intention? Buyer's intention was only to maximize buyer satisfaction. What was the intention of the sellers? Only to maximize their satisfaction or utility or revenue, whatever you may call it. So, in result, maximum social welfare was neither a part of buyer's objective nor a part of seller's objective or intention. Nor is it always the worse for the society that it was no part of it. That is again interesting. That means society is not worse off because buyers and sellers, they were maximizing their own utility in the process. By pursuing his own interest, he frequently promotes that the society more effectually than when he really intends to promote it. Had the buyers and sellers been not interest maximizers, probably we would not have arrived the end result what the society is looking for. Very interesting point. So, buyers and sellers, they are promoting their self interest, and as a result of which we are getting an end result which is maximum social welfare. So, society is getting maximum social welfare because they were behaving in a way to maximize their own. Had they motivated by social welfare maximization, probably society would not have arrived at the end result what the society is looking for. Okay? So, had the buyers and sellers been motivated by something else rather than self utility, probably society would not have arrived at the end result what the society is desiring for. What is it desiring for? Maximum social welfare. Okay. So, then what we have learned, the market, free market versus government intervention, that market equilibrium is efficient. No other outcome achieves higher total surplus, that we have proved. Government cannot raise total surplus by changing the market allocation. And laissez-faire, that means this is a French phrase, allow them to do. The notion that government should not interfere with the market, this is a concept. That means government should allow the free market to operate, they should not intervene, and by not interfering in the market condition, market is actually leading to a situation in which resource allocation is efficient, social welfare is maximum. Suppose resources were allocated not by the market, by a central planner who cares about society's welfare. Now, this is a centralized resource allocation we are talking about. Market allocation, we can think of a decentralized resource allocation. That means every buyers and sellers, they are interacting and their interaction is leading to a particular allocation which is social welfare maximization. Assume instead of that there is a social planner who would like to allocate resources. Then what the social planner would have to do? Social planner would have to find out the willingness to pay for the buyers and willingness to receive for each and every sellers. So, to allocate resource efficiently and maximize total surplus, the planner would need to know every seller's cost and every buyer's willingness to pay for each and every good in the entire economy. You can think of it is an Herculean task. When there are n number of buyers and n number of sellers, how would the social planner know the willingness to pay for each and every buyer and cost of production for each and every seller? Okay? So, it is an Herculean impossible task, and that is why centrally planned economies are never very efficient. So, in the conclusion, what we have learned from this chapter, that markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity. An important note that you have to keep in mind, we derive this lesson assuming a perfectly competitive markets, but there are contexts where market fails to achieve efficient resource allocation and thereby maximum social welfare. There are two such contexts. Those things we will discuss later. For the time being, I am just mentioning, when there is imperfectly competitive market, market is not perfect, that means either the buyers or the sellers, they have some kind of market power. Okay? In competitive market, we assume no single buyer or seller can actually influence the market outcome. That means they do not have any market power. That is called a competitive market, and we have derived this outcome that markets are usually a good way to organize economic activity based on the situation of competitive market only. The moment you allow imperfectly competitive market, that means market with market power enjoyed either by the sellers or by the buyers, is one context where market fails to achieve efficient resource allocation. Another context is the presence of externality. That means, when the economic activity impacts someone else who is not directly involved. For example, you can take up pollution. A firm is polluting for which the neighbors are suffering, and firm is not going to compensate the neighbors. So, that means this is a case of externality. So, in these two contexts, market fails and we need government intervention. Otherwise, market is generally or usually a good way to organize economic activities. That is what we have learned, and that particular market we are talking about so far is perfectly competitive market with n number of buyers and n number of sellers. No single buyer and seller can actually influence the market outcome. Okay. With this, we are closing our discussion today. Thank you.